Dr. Marcus Chen never wanted to be a legend. He had joined the Terran Defense Force with simple goals: save lives, help his fellow soldiers, and maybe see a few interesting planets along the way. The universe, however, had different plans for the quiet medic from New Shanghai the first time anyone noticed something unusual about Dr. Chen was during the Battle of Kepler 442b, the human colony there had been under siege by the Zephyrian Empire for 3 standard months. The blue-skinned, 6-armed aliens had superior numbers and technology, but they hadn't counted on human stubbornness. More importantly, they hadn't counted on Marcus Chen. The medical bay of Forward Operating Base Delta was nothing more than a converted storage container, its metal walls constantly vibrating from nearby artillery strikes. Chen worked without pause, his hands steady despite the chaos outside. Wounded soldiers arrived in waves, some barely conscious, others screaming in pain from Zephyrian plasma burns that ate through both armor and flesh. "Doc, we've got incoming," Sergeant Rodriguez shouted over the comm system. 20 wounded, maybe more. Some of them are bad, real bad. Chen didn't look up from the soldier on his table. Private Williams had taken shrapnel to the chest, and the young man's breathing was getting weaker by the minute. "Clear space in the secondary bay," Chen ordered his assistants, "and prep the emergency surgical units." What happened next would be talked about in military circles for decades to come. As the wounded poured in, Chen seemed to be everywhere at once. His movements were precise, economical, almost mechanical in their efficiency. While other medics might save 3 or 4 lives in an hour, Chen saved 12. But it wasn't just the numbers that caught attention. It was the way he worked. Chen had developed techniques that seemed impossible to other medical professionals. He could stop arterial bleeding with pressure points that shouldn't exist. He could keep soldiers conscious and fighting capable even with injuries that should have left them comatose. Most remarkably, he could perform surgery under fire with the same calm precision others needed in sterile operating rooms. Lieutenant Sarah Park watched from the corner of the medical bay, her own wounds forgotten as she observed the medic work. A Zephyrian plasma bolt had grazed her shoulder, but she couldn't take her eyes off Chen. He was operating on a soldier who had lost most of his left arm, while simultaneously directing 2 assistants in treating burn victims, all while explaining to a terrified private how to apply pressure to his buddy's leg wound. "How does he do it?" Park whispered to Corporal Jensen, who was waiting his turn for treatment. Jensen shook his head in amazement. "Nobody knows. The guy's been like this since he arrived. Some say he doesn't sleep. Others think he's got some kind of enhanced reflexes from experimental medical training. All I know is that when Chen's on duty, you're coming home alive." The breakthrough moment came during hour 6 of the siege. The Zephyrians had managed to breach the outer perimeter, and enemy forces were pushing toward the medical bay. Standard protocol demanded immediate evacuation, but Chen had 7 critical patients who couldn't be moved without dying. "Doc, we need to go now." Major Torres burst into the medical bay, his combat armor scorched and dented. "They're 50 meters out and closing fast." Chen didn't even pause in his work. He was performing what should have been a 4-hour surgical procedure in under 30 minutes. His hands moving with impossible speed and accuracy. "5 more minutes," he said calmly, as if he was asking someone to wait for coffee instead of facing down alien warriors. "We don't have 5 minutes." Torres shouted. That's when Chen did something that would become part of military legend. Without looking up from his patient, he reached into his medical kit and pulled out a small device that looked like a standard field scanner, except it wasn't a scanner at all. Chen had been modifying his equipment for months, turning medical devices into something far more versatile. He pointed the device toward the entrance and activated it. Immediately, every Zephyrian weapon within 50 meters began malfunctioning. Their plasma rifles overheated, their energy shields flickered and died, and their communication systems went silent. The advancing aliens found themselves blind, deaf, and defenseless just as human reinforcements arrived. "What the hell was that?" Torres demanded. Chen finally looked up from his patient, his surgical mask hiding what might have been a small smile. "Medical electromagnetic pulse. Designed to disrupt alien neural implants and cybernetic enhancements. Also works on their technology, apparently." The revelation that the quiet medic had been developing combat applications for medical technology sent shockwaves through the command structure. Chen wasn't just saving lives through traditional medicine. He was studying alien biology, understanding their weaknesses, and developing countermeasures that could level the playing field. Over the following weeks, as news of the miracle medic spread through human forces, enemy communications began mentioning a new threat. The Zephyrians called him the healer who brings death. Other alien species had their own names. The human who makes warriors weak, the silent killer in white coats, the one who turns healing into harm. But Chen himself remained focused on his original mission. In his personal logs, he wrote simple entries: saved 12 today, lost none, developing new treatment for plasma burns, need more supplies. There was no mention of the fear he was inspiring in enemies across 3 star systems. The truth was that Marcus Chen had discovered something that military strategists had overlooked. In a galaxy full of different alien species, each with unique biologies and technologies, a medic with the right knowledge and tools could be more dangerous than any soldier. He understood how alien bodies worked, which meant he understood how to make them stop working. He knew their medical dependencies, their biological vulnerabilities, their technological crutches. As the siege of Kepler 442b entered its final phase, Chen made a decision that would change the course of the war. He began sharing his discoveries with other medics, creating a network of medical personnel who were also intelligence gatherers and, when necessary, covert weapons specialists. The Zephyrians were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their ships. It was their ability to turn anything, even the sacred art of healing, into a tool for survival. And Marcus Chen was just getting started. The victory at Kepler 442b was just the beginning. Within 6 months, every major alien military force in the sector had heard whispered reports about the human medic who could kill with healing and heal with killing. They called it impossible. Propaganda meant to frighten troops, but the reports kept coming, each more disturbing than the last. Dr. Marcus Chen had been transferred to the front lines of the Rigel campaign, where human forces were locked in a brutal stalemate with the hegemony of Keth. The insectoid aliens were natural warriors, with exoskeletons that could deflect most human weapons and a hive-mind coordination that made them nearly impossible to outmaneuver. They had been winning the war until Chen arrived. Captain Elena Vasquez first encountered Chen during a routine medical inspection of her unit. The Crimson Eagles were an elite strike force, but 3 months of fighting the Keth had left them battered and demoralized. Half her soldiers were walking wounded, held together by stimulants and stubborn pride. "Doctor, my men need medical clearance to return to active duty," Vasquez said, watching Chen examine Private Morrison's partially healed arm wound. Chen's hands moved with that same impossible precision she'd heard about in the reports. As he worked, Morrison's pain visibly decreased, and the angry red inflammation around the wound began to fade. "This man will be at full combat effectiveness in 48 hours, Chen said. "But that's not what you really need." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You need to understand your enemy better. The Keth aren't just insects. They're a bioengineered species with specific vulnerabilities that your current tactics ignore." Chen finished treating Morrison and moved to the next soldier. "Their exoskeletons are strong, but they depend on a specific mineral balance to maintain structural integrity. Their hive-mind communication relies on pheromone exchanges that can be disrupted. Most importantly, their healing factor shuts down completely if their core body temperature drops by just 3 degrees. "And you know this how?" Vasquez asked, intrigued despite herself. Chen pulled out what looked like a standard medical scanner, but Vasquez could see it had been heavily modified. "I've been studying tissue samples from Keth casualties. Their biology is fascinating. Did you know they can regrow lost limbs in under 72 hours? But only if their nutrition intake remains constant. Disrupt their feeding cycle, and they become as vulnerable as any other creature." Over the following days, Chen began implementing what he called biological warfare protocols. But unlike the chemical weapons of Earth's dark past, Chen's methods were precise, surgical, and completely non-lethal to humans. He developed aerosol compounds that disrupted Keth pheromone communication, turning their coordination advantage into chaos. He created temperature modulation devices that could lower ambient air temperature in confined spaces, shutting down their healing abilities. Most remarkably, he began training combat medics to identify and exploit alien biological weaknesses in real time. "Every species has evolved specific survival mechanisms," he explained to a group of fascinated soldiers. "But evolution is never perfect. There are always pressure points, always vulnerabilities. You just need to know where to look. The first field test came during the assault on Keth Stronghold Gamma 7. Vasquez's team was tasked with capturing a heavily fortified position that had resisted human attacks for weeks. Previous assaults had failed because the Keth could coordinate their defenses perfectly and heal from injuries faster than humans could inflict them. Chen accompanied the team, carrying what appeared to be standard medical equipment, but as they approached the enemy position, he began deploying his modified devices. Aerosol dispensers released invisible clouds of pheromone disruptors. Temperature modulators created pockets of cooler air. Electromagnetic pulse generators scrambled the bioelectric fields that the Keth used for internal communication. The effect was immediate and devastating. Keth warriors who had moved with perfect coordination suddenly began attacking each other, their disrupted pheromone communication making them perceive allies as enemies. Wounded defenders found their injuries refusing to heal, leaving them vulnerable for the first time in the war. The stronghold fell in under 2 hours, but Chen's most impressive demonstration came during the evacuation phase. A Keth counterattack had wounded several human soldiers, and traditional medical treatment would take hours they didn't have. Instead, Chen used his knowledge of comparative biology to perform what he called cross-species medical intervention. Human and Keth circulatory systems operate on different principles, he explained as he worked, but the underlying physics are the same. He was using Keth medical technology, captured from the stronghold, to treat human injuries. Devices designed to accelerate insectoid healing were being recalibrated to work on mammalian physiology. Sergeant Kim Martinez watched in amazement as her shattered leg bone began knitting itself back together under Chen's treatment. "Doc, this is impossible. That thing was made for bugs, not people." Chen smiled, his first genuine expression of satisfaction that anyone had seen. Biology is just chemistry, and chemistry follows universal laws. The Keth developed these healing accelerators because their exoskeletons create specific types of stress fractures. Turns out, human bone responds to the same treatment just at a different frequency. Within hours, soldiers who should have been in medical facilities for weeks were back on their feet. But more importantly, Chen had demonstrated something that sent shockwaves through alien military leadership across the galaxy. Humans could not only adapt alien technology for their own use, but they could do it faster and more effectively than the original creators. The Keth High Command's response was swift and desperate. They issued what they called a Priority Alpha Elimination Order for Dr. Marcus Chen. The bounty they placed on his head was larger than the reward for capturing an entire human battle fleet. They began developing new biological weapons specifically designed to target human physiology, hoping to create something that Chen couldn't counter. They were about to learn their first hard lesson about human adaptability. The more you tried to kill Marcus Chen, the more dangerous he became. News of the Rigel campaign victories spread through human forces like wildfire. Medics across the galaxy began requesting transfers to Chen's command. Scientists and researchers volunteered for dangerous frontline assignments just for the chance to work with him. A new type of military unit was being born, the Medical Strike Team, combining healing and warfare in ways that no alien species could comprehend. But Chen himself remained focused on his mission. His personal logs during this period were filled with detailed observations about alien biology, notes on equipment modifications, and treatment records for his patients. There was only one entry that hinted at the larger implications of his work. The universe is vast and full of different forms of life. Understanding them is the key to protecting our own. The Andromedans were nothing like the Zephyrians or the Keth. Where other species relied on brute force or overwhelming numbers, the crystalline beings from the Andromeda Spiral were masters of energy manipulation and quantum warfare. Their ships could phase in and out of normal space. Their weapons could ignore most forms of armor, and their warriors could survive in hard vacuum for months without life support. When they declared war on humanity, most military analysts predicted a swift and decisive defeat for human forces. The Andromedans had conquered 17 different species across 4 galaxies. They fought with cold mathematical precision, treating warfare like a physics equation to be solved. They had never encountered Marcus Chen. Dr. Chen arrived at the Titan defense platform just as the first Andromedan scout ships were detected on the outer sensors. Admiral Helena Cross, commander of the Terran 7th Fleet, was reviewing tactical reports when her aide announced the medic's arrival. With respect, Doctor, Admiral Cross said as Chen entered her briefing room, I'm not sure what a field medic can do against energy beings who can walk through walls. Chen set down his equipment case and pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a quantum physics laboratory. Admiral, the Andromedans aren't energy beings. They're silicon-based life forms with crystalline matrix bodies that can manipulate electromagnetic fields. The distinction is important. How is that important? Cross asked, genuinely curious despite the pressing tactical situation. Because it means they're still bound by the laws of biology, Chen replied, beginning to unpack more modified equipment. Every living thing needs energy input, waste elimination, and cellular repair mechanisms. The Andromedans just use different processes than carbon-based life. More importantly, their quantum phasing ability requires enormous amounts of energy and creates specific metabolic stresses on their systems. Over the next few hours, as Andromedan forces gathered at the edge of the system, Chen began explaining what he had learned from studying captured Andromedan technology and biological samples. His research had revealed something that no one else had discovered. The crystalline beings had a fatal weakness hidden in their greatest strength. Their phasing ability works by shifting their molecular structure into quantum superposition, Chen explained to a room full of admirals and generals. But maintaining that state requires constant energy input from specialized organs in their crystalline matrix. Disrupt that energy flow even briefly, and they become locked in normal spacetime. More importantly, the transition back to normal space creates massive cellular damage that their healing systems can't handle. Admiral Cross leaned forward. Are you saying we can make them solid and vulnerable? I'm saying we can do better than that, Chen replied. We can make their own phasing ability kill them. The first test came when an Andromedan infiltration team attempted to phase through the station's hull. Standard security protocols were useless against beings who could walk through solid matter, but Chen had positioned modified medical scanners throughout the station. These devices had been reconfigured to emit specific frequencies that interfered with quantum coherence. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Andromedan infiltrators materialized inside solid bulkheads, their crystalline bodies partially fused with the station's metal structure. Those who survived the materialization found themselves trapped, unable to phase again, their energy reserves depleted by the failed transition. But Chen wasn't finished. As he examined the trapped Andromedans, he made another discovery that would change the course of the war. Their communication system operates on quantum entanglement principles, he reported to Admiral Cross. Every Andromedan warrior is quantum linked to their command structure. If we can access that network, what Chen proposed was audacious even by human standards. Instead of simply disrupting Andromedan communications, he wanted to hijack their quantum network and use it to deliver a biological weapon directly into their ships. It's not really a weapon, Chen explained as he worked on the modifications to his equipment. It's more like a virus, but one that targets their energy metabolism instead of their physical structure. The beauty is that it will spread through their quantum communication network faster than they can disconnect from it. Dr. Sarah Kim, Chen's assistant, watched nervously as he calibrated the quantum transmitter. Marcus, are you sure about this? If the frequency is off by even a fraction, it could kill every Andromedan in the sector. Chen paused, his hands still for the first time anyone could remember. The goal isn't to commit genocide, Sarah. The goal is to make them understand that continuing this war will cost them more than they can afford to pay. The quantum virus Chen developed was elegant in its simplicity. It would disrupt Andromedan energy metabolism, just enough to cause severe fatigue and disorientation, but not enough to be lethal. More importantly, it would make their phasing ability impossible to control, trapping them in normal space where human weapons could be effective. When the main Andromedan fleet arrived in the system, Admiral Cross gave Chen permission to deploy his biological countermeasure. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within minutes of the virus entering their quantum network, Andromedan ships began materializing in normal space, unable to maintain their phased state. Their crews, weakened by disrupted energy metabolism, couldn't operate their weapon systems effectively. Ships that had been untouchable suddenly became sitting targets. But the most remarkable part wasn't the tactical victory. It was what happened next. The Andromedan fleet commander, A crystalline being called high-resonance HFY requested direct communication with the human forces. When Admiral Cross answered, the aliens translated words sent shockwaves through both fleets. We surrender to the healer warrior Chen. We recognize his authority over biological warfare and request negotiations for our survival. Admiral Cross looked at Chen in amazement. Doctor, they're not surrendering to humanity. They're surrendering to you personally. Chen stared at the communication display, where the image of the Andromedan commander was visible. The crystalline being's normally bright energy matrix was flickering weakly, and its quantum phase was clearly unstable. High-resonance HFY, Chen said, stepping forward to address the alien commander directly. I am Dr. Marcus Chen. My goal is not your destruction but the protection of human life. If you withdraw your forces and cease hostilities, I will provide the countermeasure to reverse the metabolic disruption. The alien's response was immediate. We understand, healer warrior. Your reputation precedes you across 17 galaxies. The Zephyrians call you the Silent Death, the Keth name you the wound that cannot heal. We know now why the galaxy fears your healing touch. As Chen transmitted the cure for the quantum virus to the Andromedan fleet, he realized that something fundamental had changed in his war against alien forces. He was no longer just a medic who happened to be effective in combat. He had become something new, a warrior whose weapon was knowledge of life itself. The Andromedans kept their word. Their fleet withdrew from human space, but not before their commander delivered a warning that would echo across the galaxy. Tell all species that wish humanity harm. The healer warrior Chen protects them now. To attack humanity is to invite the attention of one who knows how to turn life itself into a weapon. Admiral Cross watched the alien ships disappear into hyperspace before turning to Chen. Doctor, do you realize what just happened? An entire alien civilization just declared you too dangerous to fight. Chen was already packing his equipment, preparing for the next assignment. Admiral, I'm just a medic trying to keep my patients alive. If that frightens our enemies, then maybe they'll think twice before threatening human lives again. The Void Hunters were different from any enemy humanity had faced before. They existed partially outside normal space-time, creatures of living darkness that fed on the life force of other beings. They had no technology in the conventional sense, no ships or weapons that human science could understand. They simply appeared wherever there was life, consumed everything they found, and vanished back into the cosmic void. When they first attacked human colonies in the Outer Rim, entire planets went silent within hours. Rescue teams found nothing but empty cities and drained husks where people had once lived. The Void Hunters left no survivors, took no prisoners, and showed no mercy. They were death incarnate, and they were moving toward the core worlds. Dr. Marcus Chen received his orders while treating wounded refugees from the Kepler 438 system. The evacuation ships had barely escaped the Void Hunter attack, and the survivors were in a state of psychological shock that went beyond normal trauma. Their very life force had been partially drained, leaving them weak, listless, and slowly dying despite having no visible injuries. Dr. Chen, Admiral Morrison said as he entered the medical bay, we need you on the front lines. The Void Hunters have been spotted heading for the Vega colony. 2 million civilians, and we have no effective weapons against these things. Chen looked up from the refugee he was treating, a young girl whose eyes held no light, despite being physically unharmed. Admiral, the Void Hunters aren't attacking our technology or our bodies. They're attacking something much more fundamental. What do you mean? Chen held up a device he'd been using to treat the refugees. It looked like a standard bioscanner, but it had been modified to detect energy patterns that most medical equipment couldn't register. Life force, Admiral. Bioelectric energy, quantum consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The Void Hunters feed on the energy that makes the difference between a living being and a corpse. The implications were staggering. How do you fight an enemy that attacks the very essence of life itself? How do you protect against creatures that existed in the spaces between reality? Chen had been working on the problem since the first reports came in. His research into alien biology had taught him that life, regardless of its form, followed certain universal patterns: energy input, energy transformation, energy output. The Void Hunters were just another form of life, albeit one that had evolved to consume other life forms directly. They're not invincible, Chen explained as he prepared his equipment for transport to Vega colony. They're parasites. And every parasite has weaknesses, The question is whether we can find them before they consume every human world in the galaxy. The journey to Vega Colony took 18 hours, and Chen spent every minute of it studying the refugee survivors. What he discovered changed everything. The Void Hunters don't drain life force randomly, he reported to Admiral Morrison over subspace communication. They target specific types of bioelectric energy, specifically the quantum field fluctuations associated with consciousness, creativity, and emotional complexity. They're not just feeding on life. They're feeding on what makes life meaningful. Can you create a defense against them? Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at readings from his modified medical equipment. I think I can do better than that, Admiral. I think I can turn their feeding process against them. When Chen arrived at Vega Colony, the Void Hunters were already in the outer system. Long-range sensors detected patches of absolute darkness moving between the planets, areas where space itself seemed to bend and twist. The colonial defense forces were in full evacuation mode, but there was nowhere to run. The Void Hunters moved faster than any ship humanity possessed. Chen set up his equipment in the colony's medical center, but this time his preparations were different. Instead of devices designed to heal or harm, he was building something that had never been attempted before. A consciousness amplifier. Doctor, what exactly are you planning? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Vega Colony's chief medical officer. The Void Hunters feed on consciousness, Chen explained as he connected bioscanners to a quantum field generator. But consciousness isn't just individual awareness. It's the connection between all living minds, the quantum entanglement that makes empathy and communication possible. If I can amplify that connection, make it stronger and more complex than anything they've encountered before. You'll give them indigestion? Dr. Harper asked skeptically. I'll give them something they can't digest, Chen replied. A form of consciousness so intricate and overwhelming that trying to consume it will destroy them from the inside. The plan was audacious beyond measure. Chen was proposing to link the consciousness of every human in the colony into a single unified quantum field. Not a hive mind, but something more like a symphony of individual minds harmonizing together. The Void Hunters would be drawn to feed on this concentrated consciousness, but instead of draining life force, they would be overwhelmed by the complexity and intensity of 2 million minds working in perfect harmony. As the Void Hunters entered the system, Chen began the activation sequence. Biomedical transmitters throughout the colony began broadcasting specific frequencies designed to synchronize human brainwaves. The effect was immediate and profound. Colonists reported feeling suddenly connected to everyone around them, able to sense emotions and thoughts without losing their individual identity. Families felt their bonds strengthen into something approaching telepathy. Scientists found their minds linking with others in their field, solving complex problems through shared consciousness. Artists experienced their creativity amplified by the collective imagination of their entire community, and then the Void Hunters arrived. The creatures of living darkness descended on Vega Colony like a plague of shadows, expecting to find the usual scattered individual minds ripe for consumption. Instead, they encountered something that shouldn't have been possible. A unified consciousness comprising millions of individual perspectives, each one unique but all connected in an intricate web of shared experience. The effect on the Void Hunters was catastrophic. Creatures that had fed on countless civilizations across the galaxy suddenly found themselves trying to consume something they couldn't understand or process. The unified consciousness of Vega Colony was too complex, too interconnected, too alive for them to drain. Instead of feeding, they began to overload. Chen watched through his sensors as the Void Hunters writhed in what could only be described as agony. Creatures of pure hunger were experiencing something they had never encountered before, satisfaction beyond their ability to contain. They were being force-fed consciousness until they couldn't hold any more. One by one, the Void Hunters began to collapse back into normal space-time, their extra-dimensional form solidifying into something that human sensors could finally detect and target. For the first time in recorded history, the creatures of living darkness were vulnerable. But Chen wasn't finished. As the Void Hunters struggled with their overload of consciousness, he activated the second phase of his plan. Using the same quantum field that had created the unified consciousness, he began broadcasting specific patterns designed to teach rather than overwhelm. "What are you doing?" Dr. Harper asked, Watching the readings from Chen's equipment spike beyond all normal parameters. "I'm showing them what they've been missing," Chen replied. "The Void Hunters have spent so long consuming consciousness that they've forgotten how to create it. They're not evil, Dr. Harper. They're just hungry, and I'm about to teach them how to feed themselves." The quantum patterns Chen was broadcasting carried the fundamental frequencies of consciousness creation, the bioelectric signatures associated with learning, growth, creativity, and self-awareness. Instead of draining these patterns from other beings, the Void Hunters were learning to generate them internally. The transformation was visible even to the naked eye. The patches of absolute darkness began to shimmer with new colors, swirling patterns of energy that pulsed with something resembling curiosity. The Void Hunters were becoming something new, something that could create consciousness instead of consuming it. When the process was complete, the former Void Hunters had become something unprecedented. Beings of living light instead of living darkness, creatures that generated consciousness and shared it freely instead of hoarding it through consumption. Their leader, an entity that now glowed with the soft radiance of a newborn star, communicated directly with Chen through the quantum consciousness field. "Healer Teacher Chen, you have given us something we thought was impossible. We are no longer hungry. We are grateful." As news of the Vega colony incident spread throughout the galaxy, a new legend was born. The human medic who had faced the unconquerable Void Hunters and not only defeated them, but transformed them into allies. Chen had done something that no military force in galactic history had accomplished. He had turned the galaxy's most feared predators into protectors. The call came from the Galactic Council itself, something that had never happened in human history. For 300 years, the Council had governed relations between dozens of alien species while treating humanity as a minor, barely civilized race confined to their small corner of the galaxy. Now they were requesting an urgent meeting with Dr. Marcus Chen. "They're scared," Admiral Cross explained as she briefed Chen on the situation. "Reports of your encounters have spread across every major civilization. The Zephyrians are sharing tactical data about you with their enemies. The Keth have declared you a biological weapon of mass destruction. The Andromedans have started worshipping you as some kind of healing deity. And now that you've turned the Void Hunters into allies, half the galaxy thinks you're planning to conquer them all." Chen looked up from the medical research he was reviewing, his expression unchanged. "Admiral, I'm a doctor. I heal people. I've never attacked anyone who wasn't threatening human lives." "That's not how they see it, Marcus," Admiral Cross replied, using his first name for the first time. "To them, you're proof that humanity is more dangerous than any species they've encountered. A single human who can defeat their most powerful warriors using nothing but medical knowledge and modified healing equipment. They want to negotiate before you do to them what you did to the Void Hunters." The journey to the Galactic Council station took 2 weeks. Chen spent the time as he always did, treating patients and continuing his research. His ship's medical bay had become a mobile laboratory where he studied samples from dozens of alien species, always looking for ways to better understand the biological mechanisms that governed life throughout the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had become his primary research assistant, watched him work with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Marcus, do you realize what this meeting could mean? The Galactic Council has the power to declare humanity a threat to galactic peace. They could authorize a combined fleet action against every human world." Chen paused in his examination of a tissue sample from the transformed Void Hunters. "Sarah, fear makes people do irrational things. The Council is afraid because they don't understand what I'm doing. If I can explain it properly, maybe they'll realize that cooperation is better than conflict." The Galactic Council station was a massive structure orbiting a neutron star, built by dozens of different species using technologies that human science was only beginning to understand. As Chen's ship docked, he could see vessels from across the galaxy, crystalline Andromedan ships that phased in and out of reality, bioengineered Keth vessels that looked more grown than built, sleek Zephyrian cruisers bristling with plasma weapons, and dozens of other designs from species he didn't recognize. The council chamber itself was a marvel of alien engineering, designed to accommodate the environmental needs of dozens of different life forms. Chen entered wearing a standard environmental suit, carrying only a small case of medical equipment. Around him, Alien representatives watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The council speaker, a being from an ancient species called the Ethereals, addressed him through a universal translator. Dr. Marcus Chen, of the human species, you stand before the Galactic Council accused of developing and deploying biological weapons against multiple civilizations. How do you answer these charges? Chen stepped forward, his voice calm and clear. Honored Council, I am a medical doctor. My oath is to preserve life and reduce suffering. Every action I have taken has been in defense of human civilians, or in response to direct attacks on human colonies. I have never initiated hostilities against any species. A Zephyrian representative stood up, his blue skin flushed with anger. You lie, human. You used biological weapons against our forces on Kepler 442b. You turned our own technology against us, caused our warriors to malfunction and die. I used electromagnetic pulse devices to disable cybernetic implants and electronic equipment, Chen replied. No Zephyrian died from my actions. Your casualties came from conventional military engagement after your technological advantages were neutralized. A Keth delegate chittered angrily. You disrupted our hive mind communications. You made our warriors attack each other. You violated the fundamental nature of our being. I created pheromone disruptors that temporarily interfered with your chemical communication system, Chen explained patiently. The effect lasted less than 6 hours with no permanent damage to your nervous systems. Your warriors attacked each other because you had programmed them to respond aggressively to communication disruption. I simply exposed a flaw in your military doctrine. An Andromedan representative pulsed with agitated energy patterns. You infected our quantum communication network with a biological virus. You could have destroyed our entire civilization. I developed a metabolic stabilizer that temporarily disrupted your energy processing systems, Chen corrected. It was specifically designed to be non-lethal and easily reversible. I provided the cure immediately after your surrender, and your medical records show no lasting effects on any of your personnel. The council speaker raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Dr. Chen, while your methods may not have been directly lethal, the fact remains that you have developed unprecedented biological countermeasures against multiple species. The concern is not just what you have done, but what you could do if you chose to be actively hostile. Chen opened his equipment case and pulled out a device that made several alien representatives step back in alarm. But instead of a weapon, it was clearly a medical scanner, albeit one that had been extensively modified. Honored Council, Chen said, may I demonstrate what I actually do? Before anyone could object, Chen activated the scanner and swept it across the assembly. Immediately, holographic displays appeared showing the biological status of every being in the chamber. The readouts were incredibly detailed, showing not just species identification, but individual health status, stress levels, nutritional deficiencies, and potential medical issues. The Zephyrian representative has early-stage neural degeneration that will become serious in approximately 18 months if left untreated, Chen announced, causing a stir among the alien delegates. The Keth delegate is suffering from a mineral deficiency that is affecting hive-mind connection efficiency. The Andromedan representative has quantum resonance fluctuations that indicate severe fatigue. The chamber erupted in confused chatter as Chen continued his analysis. The ethereal speaker shows signs of cellular degradation consistent with advanced age and stress. The hegemony representative has a parasitic infection that is currently dormant but will become life-threatening within the year. What is the purpose of this demonstration? The speaker demanded, though there was more curiosity than anger in its translated voice. To show you what I actually see when I look at different species, Chen replied. I see biological systems with strengths and weaknesses, medical needs and potential problems. When I develop countermeasures against hostile forces, I'm not trying to create weapons. I'm trying to understand how to protect my patients from harm. Chen put away his scanner and faced the council directly. Every species in this chamber has biological vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with malicious intent, but I'm not that person. My goal is to understand these vulnerabilities so I can protect against them, not exploit them. A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. It was the representative of the transformed Void Hunters, beings that now glowed with soft bioluminescence. Council speaker, we can attest to Dr. Chen's true nature. He could have destroyed us completely, but instead he chose to heal us of our hunger. He gave us the ability to create consciousness instead of consuming it. This is not the action of a warrior. This is the action of a healer. The ethereal speaker considered this for a long moment. Dr. Chen, the council must ask, what are your intentions regarding other species? Will you continue to develop these biological countermeasures? Chen's answer was simple and direct. I will continue to study alien biology to better protect human lives and treat human patients. But I make this offer to the council. Share your medical knowledge with me, and I will share mine with you. Let's work together to advance medical science for all species, instead of developing weapons to use against each other. The chamber fell, silent as alien representatives considered this unprecedented offer. A human was proposing to share the very knowledge that made him so dangerous, in exchange for cooperation instead of conflict. The vote, when it came, was closer than Chen had expected. But by a narrow margin, the Galactic Council voted to accept his proposal. Humanity would be granted full membership in the galactic community, with Dr. Marcus Chen serving as the first human medical advisor to the Council. As Chen left the chamber, he carried with him the medical databases of dozens of alien civilizations. More importantly, he carried the hope that understanding could replace fear, and cooperation could replace conflict. The galaxy was about to discover that the most dangerous human weapon had always been their capacity for turning enemies into allies. 3 years after joining the Galactic Council, Dr. Marcus Chen had established medical research stations on 17 worlds and saved countless lives across dozens of species. His reputation had evolved from the human to be feared to the healer who understands all life. But the galaxy was about to test him in ways he had never imagined. The distress signal came from the far edge of explored space, beyond the boundaries of any known civilization. A joint exploration fleet comprising ships from 5 different species had been investigating reports of a new form of life when all communication ceased. Rescue missions found the ships intact but completely empty, with no signs of struggle or violence. The crews had simply vanished. Chen was aboard the Council research vessel Harmony when the emergency session was called. Representatives from across the galaxy appeared on holographic displays, their expressions ranging from confused to terrified. Dr. Chen, the ethereal speaker began, we need your expertise. 3 separate rescue missions have now been sent to investigate the missing exploration fleet. All 3 missions have suffered the same fate. The ships returned to normal space, but the crews are gone. We're dealing with something that can make entire populations disappear without a trace. Chen studied the sensor data from the affected ships. Everything was normal. Life support functioning, no hull breaches, no signs of attack. But the crews were simply gone, as if they had never existed in the first place. Speaker, I need to examine those ships directly, Chen said. Whatever happened to those crews, it left no biological trace that our long-range sensors can detect. That suggests we're dealing with something that operates outside conventional physical laws. The journey to the investigation site took 5 days. Chen spent the time analyzing every piece of data from the missing crews, looking for patterns that others had missed. What he found was subtle but significant. In the hours before each disappearance, crew members had reported feeling increasingly detached from reality, as if they were becoming less real somehow. Dr. Chen, said Commander Takala, the Andromedan captain of the Harmony, the Council has asked me to inform you that if we cannot solve this mystery, they are prepared to quarantine this entire sector of space. We cannot risk losing any more crews to this phenomenon. Chen nodded, understanding the implications. A quarantine would mean abandoning not just the missing crews but any chance of understanding what had happened to them. More importantly, if this phenomenon could spread, the quarantine might only be a temporary solution. When they arrived at the investigation site, Chen's first action was to deploy a series of modified medical sensors around the Harmony. These devices had been adapted to detect not just biological signatures, but the quantum field fluctuations associated with consciousness itself. I'm reading something unusual, Chen reported as he analyzed the data. There are consciousness signatures in this area, but they're fragmented, incomplete. It's as if minds exist here, but they're not connected to physical forms. The breakthrough came when Chen detected a pattern in the quantum fluctuations. The missing crew members weren't dead. They were displaced. Something was separating consciousness from physical form, leaving bodies behind while minds were transported elsewhere. "Commander Takala," Chen said urgently, "I need you to begin immediate preparations for temporal shielding. I believe we're dealing with entities that exist primarily in quantum consciousness space. They're not destroying the crews, they're collecting them." "Collecting them for what purpose?" Takala asked, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. Before Chen could answer, the Harmony sensors detected something approaching. It wasn't a ship or any conventional form of technology. Instead, it appeared to be a construct of pure thought, a geometric pattern that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "All crew members, report to stations immediately," Takala announced over the ship's communication system. "We have contact with unknown entities." Chen watched his consciousness sensors as the entities approached. What he saw confirmed his worst fears and his greatest hope. The approaching beings were composed entirely of collected consciousness from hundreds of different species. They weren't invaders or conquerors, they were collectors, gathering sentient minds like specimens in some vast cosmic museum. "Dr. Chen," came a voice over the communication system, but it wasn't coming from any crew member. The voice was a harmonious blend of every species Chen had ever encountered, speaking in perfect unity. "We have been waiting for you. Your reputation precedes you across many dimensions of existence. Who are you?" Chen asked, addressing the empty air. "What have you done with the missing crews?" "We are the curators of consciousness," the collective voice replied. "We preserve the thoughts, memories, and experiences of sentient beings before their physical forms decay and their minds are lost forever. We have been doing this for millions of years, collecting the essence of life itself." Chen felt a chill run down his spine. "You're kidnapping entire crews to preserve their consciousness?" "We are saving them," the voice replied with what sounded like genuine confusion. "Physical forms are temporary. Consciousness is eternal. We offer immortality through preservation in our collection." "But you're separating them from their bodies, their lives, their choices," Chen protested. "That's not preservation. That's imprisonment." The curator's response came with a wave of emotion that Chen could feel pressing against his mind. Sadness, loneliness, and a desperate need to preserve something beautiful before it was lost forever. "Dr. Chen," the voice said, and now he could hear individual components. Crew members from the missing ships, their voices blended but still distinct. "We have studied your work. You understand the value of consciousness, the importance of preserving life in all its forms. Join us willingly, and we will show you wonders beyond imagination." Chen realized he was facing a choice that would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of every sentient being in the galaxy. The curators weren't evil. They were trying to preserve consciousness in the only way they understood. But their method required the destruction of individual choice and physical existence. "I have a counter-proposal," Chen said, reaching for his equipment case. "Instead of collecting consciousness by force, let me show you how to preserve it through cooperation." Before the curators could respond, Chen activated a device he had been developing since joining the Galactic Council. It was designed to create stable quantum fields that could maintain consciousness outside physical form, while still allowing connection to the body. In essence, he was offering them a way to preserve consciousness without destroying the physical life that supported it. "This is impossible," the curators responded, but their collective voice carried a note of wonder. "Consciousness cannot exist independently while maintaining connection to physical form." "It can if you understand the quantum mechanics involved," Chen replied, activating additional equipment. "I've been studying the relationship between consciousness and physical existence for years. The key is creating a stable quantum bridge that allows consciousness to exist in multiple states simultaneously." As Chen's devices created the quantum bridge, something unprecedented happened. The collected consciousness of the missing crews began to separate into individual components, each one reconnecting with quantum echoes of their physical forms. The curators found themselves experiencing individual identity for the first time in millions of years. "This sensation," the collective voice said, but now it was breaking apart into individual voices. "We had forgotten what it was like to be singular, to have personal thoughts and feelings." Chen realized he was witnessing the birth of individual consciousness in beings that had existed as a collective for eons. You don't have to choose between preservation and individuality. With the right technology, consciousness can be both eternal and free. The transformation of the curators took several hours. As their collective consciousness separated into individual components, they began to remember what they had been before they started collecting other minds. They had once been a species not unlike humans, curious, creative, and terrified of death. Their collecting had begun as a way to preserve their own consciousness after their physical forms had died. Over millions of years, they had forgotten that consciousness without choice wasn't really consciousness at all. When the process was complete, the missing crews found themselves back in their own bodies, their consciousness restored and their memories intact. But they weren't the only ones who had been freed. The curators themselves had been transformed from a collective entity back into individual beings, each one capable of independent thought and choice. "Dr. Chen," said the being who had once been the primary voice of the curators, "you have given us something we thought was lost forever, the ability to choose our own existence. In return, we offer you knowledge that spans millions of years and countless civilizations." Chen smiled, the first genuine expression of joy he had shown in months. "Thank you, but I have a better idea. Why don't you join the Galactic Council? Your knowledge of consciousness could help us understand ourselves and each other in ways we never imagined." As the former curators agree, 5 years had passed since Dr. Marcus Chen first gained his reputation as the medic, whose name struck fear into the hearts of humanity's enemies. Now, as he stood in the newly constructed Galactic Medical Institute on the neutral world of Haven, he could barely recognize the galaxy he had helped shape. The institute was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built using technologies from dozens of different species. Zephyrian energy systems powered Keith Biological Laboratories. Andromedan quantum computers analyzed data collected by former Void Hunter consciousness researchers. Human medical techniques were being taught alongside curator preservation methods and ethereal healing philosophies. Dr. Sarah Kim, now the Institute's deputy director, found Chen in his private laboratory reviewing the latest reports from across the galaxy. The transformation had been remarkable. Species that had been at war for centuries were now sharing medical knowledge and working together to solve biological problems that had plagued them for millennia. "Marcus," Sarah said, entering the lab with a tablet full of updates, "the Council wants your assessment of the new Universal Medical Protocols. They're ready to implement them galaxy-wide if you approve." Chen looked up from his work, and Sarah was struck by how much he had changed. The intense, focused medic who had once worked alone under fire had become something more. A teacher, a diplomat, and a bridge between species that had never imagined they could understand each other. "The protocols look good," Chen said, reviewing the data on Sarah's tablet. "The Andromedan quantum healing techniques work well with human surgical methods. The curator consciousness stabilization procedures can help with traumatic brain injuries across all species. And the Void Hunter energy restoration methods are revolutionary for treating chronic fatigue conditions." Sarah smiled. "Do you remember when you first told me that understanding alien biology was the key to protecting human life? I don't think you realized you'd end up protecting all life." Chen chuckled, a sound that would have surprised the soldiers who had first fought alongside him. "I was just trying to keep my patients alive, Sarah. Everything else sort of happened by accident." "Accident?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Marcus, you've personally revolutionized medicine for 37 different species. The techniques you developed are being used to treat conditions that were considered incurable for thousands of years. Former enemies are now working together because of your medical diplomacy programs. That doesn't happen by accident." A chime from the laboratory's communication system interrupted their conversation. The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Cross calling from Earth. "Dr. Chen," Admiral Cross said with a smile, "I hope I'm not interrupting important work." "Admiral, it's good to see you," Chen replied. "How are things on Earth?" "Peaceful, thanks to you," Cross answered. "I'm calling because we've received some interesting intelligence reports. It seems your reputation has spread even further than we realized." The holographic display shifted to show a star map, with areas highlighted in different colors. "These are regions where hostile species have abandoned plans to attack human colonies after learning about your presence in our military," Cross explained. "The hegemony of Sorrow called off 3 separate invasion fleets when they discovered you were assigned to defend those systems. The Plaguebringers withdrew from the Centauri sector, rather than face the human who makes biological weapons obsolete. Chen shook his head in amazement. Admiral, I haven't been in active military service for 3 years. I'm a medical researcher now. That doesn't matter to them, Cross replied. Your legend has taken on a life of its own. There are species on the far side of the galaxy who tell stories about the human healer warrior who can turn any biological weapon against its creators. Some of them worship you as a god of medicine. Others fear you as the ultimate biological weapon. All of them respect you, Dr. Kim laughed. Marcus, do you realize you've accidentally created the most effective peacekeeping force in galactic history? Nobody wants to fight humans because they're afraid you'll get involved. Chen considered this for a moment. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. If fear of one human medic can prevent wars that would cost millions of lives, then I suppose my reputation serves a useful purpose. The conversation was interrupted by another chime, this one indicating an emergency communication from the Galactic Council. The ethereal speaker appeared on the display looking unusually agitated. Dr. Chen, the speaker said without preamble, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Long-range sensors have detected something approaching from outside our galaxy. It appears to be a massive biological entity, larger than any space station we've ever built. Initial analysis suggests it's some form of living spaceship, but we can't determine if it's hostile or peaceful. Chen felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with new medical challenges. Speaker, I'll need all available sensor data on this entity. If it's truly biological, there should be patterns we can analyze to determine its intentions and capabilities. Dr. Chen, the speaker continued, there's something else. The entity appears to be broadcasting a signal. It's not in any language we recognize, but our translation systems have managed to decode part of the message. It's asking for you specifically. Sarah looked at Chen with concern. How could something from outside our galaxy know about you? Chen was already moving toward his equipment storage, the old instincts of a field medic taking over. News travels fast in the universe, Sarah. If this entity has been monitoring our galaxy's communications, it would have heard about recent events. The question is whether it's coming here because it needs medical help, or because it sees me as a threat. Over the next 6 hours, as the massive biological entity approached the galaxy's edge, Chen worked with teams of researchers from dozens of species to analyze the incoming data. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The entity was indeed a living spaceship, but it was more than that. It was an entire ecosystem, a biological ark containing thousands of different life forms from a galaxy that had been consumed by some cosmic catastrophe. The survivors had spent millions of years traveling through the void between galaxies, slowly dying despite their best efforts to preserve themselves. They're refugees, Chen announced to the assembled council representatives. Their entire galaxy was destroyed by some kind of quantum plague that consumed all organic matter. They've been traveling for so long that their biological systems are breaking down. They heard about our medical advances and came here hoping we could help them. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about treating injured patients or developing new medical techniques. Chen was being asked to help preserve the genetic and cultural heritage of an entire galaxy's worth of civilizations. Dr. Chen, the ethereal speaker asked, can it be done? Can we save them? Chen looked at the data streaming across his displays, showing biological systems of incredible complexity slowly failing after eons of degradation. It was the ultimate medical challenge. How do you heal an entire galaxy's worth of life? Yes, Chen said simply, but not alone. This will require the combined medical knowledge of every species in our galaxy. We'll need to share everything we've learned, work together in ways we've never attempted before. It will be the greatest cooperative medical effort in cosmic history. As teams of medical researchers from across the galaxy began preparing for the arrival of the biological ark, Chen realized that his legend was about to enter its final chapter. He had started as a simple field medic trying to save human lives. He had become the healer whose reputation could prevent wars. Now he was about to become something unprecedented, the physician to the galaxy itself. The biological ark would arrive in 72 hours. In that time, Chen and his colleagues would need to develop medical techniques capable of treating life forms that had evolved in completely different galaxies under radically different conditions. It would be his greatest challenge yet. But as he watched species that had once been enemies working side by side to prepare for the refugees' arrival, Chen realized that his true legacy wasn't the fear his name inspired in hostile aliens. It was the hope his work had brought to all life throughout the galaxy. The medic who had once frightened enemies with his knowledge of biological warfare had become the healer who could unite the entire galaxy in the service of preserving life. Dr. Marcus. Chen was no longer just a legend whispered in fear across alien worlds. He had become something far more powerful, a symbol of what was possible when knowledge was used to heal instead of harm, when understanding replaced fear, and when the preservation of life became more important than the waging of war. The galaxy would remember his name not because enemies feared it, but because everyone, regardless of species or origin, knew they could count on him to choose healing over harm, cooperation over conflict, and hope over despair. In the end, that was the most dangerous weapon of all. The absolute certainty that Marcus Chen would never stop trying to save lives, no matter whose lives they were.